Howard Buffett, a name synonymous with charity the world over, advocate of the human spirit, farmer with compassion, and sheriff with a heart for helping others. His storied life is a tapestry of heartbreak and triumph, told through the lens of photographer, philanthropist, and foundation, with a mission to better the world. Tonight we meet the man, the legend, Howard Buffett. This is The Rural Americans. Howard Buffett is an ordinary man who's lived an extraordinary life. From planting corn in the backyard as a young boy to building a global charity initiative that brings food, education, and agriculture to impoverished nations, he has spent a lifetime yearning to understand the world and make it a better place. Like most rural American stories, his began with a humble upbringing in a small Midwestern neighborhood of Omaha, Nebraska.
I was actually born in White Plains, New York. I was the only Buffett, I think, in 7 generations to be born outside of Nebraska. But my dad always says I was conceived in Nebraska, and then I said, that's all the information I need to know. Don't tell me anymore.
If the name sounds familiar, you may know his father, business tycoon Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, and one of the wealthiest men in the world. But that wasn't always the case, and Howard's childhood in rural Nebraska was just like any other kid on the block.
He's so down to earth, and he's really instilled that in you. You went to public school, for example. Why do you think that's so important to him?
He's got a philosophy that everybody's pretty much the same, and you treat everybody the same. Everybody should have the same opportunities, and the world isn't fair. I mean, that's one thing I always try to teach my kids. It's full of inequities, but the opportunities we had put us way ahead of most people in this country. I mean, we just didn't have to worry about food, we didn't have to worry about going to school, we didn't have to worry about really anything. So that's something that's a pretty big deal, even if you live in this country, because there are plenty of people that have a lot of concerns about how they get through their daily life. Growing up with 2 parents in a home where both of them love you and in a very stable environment, it's a huge advantage. My mom was, in many ways, my best friend. She pushed me hard when I was a kid. She expected a lot out of us. I mean, she would never accept anything less than what she thought we should do in terms of performance in school, how we treated other people, how we interacted with our friends. She was by far, I think, the biggest factor in my life, next to my dad.
His parents instilled him with values that continue to define who he is today. Mom taught kindness and compassion, while Dad taught ethics and accountability, leading by example every step of the way.
My mom had the emotional side, my dad had the practical side, and it was a pretty good combination for all of us. He was around a lot. I mean, he was at home a lot. We had regular meals together, especially at dinner time. So he was very involved and around, but he was pretty matter of fact. My dad's in some ways like a little kid. He's very serious most of the time, but he built this big train set up in the attic, and we used to I got in trouble because I'd always want to crash the trains, and I'd ruin the bridge that someone spent 5 hours building a trestle, and I'd wreck it or something. But anyway, so that's kind of the wrecking ball. But we had a lot of fun. He had this slot machine that he bought, and he'd pay us we got an allowance. We had to empty trash or rake leaves or do something to earn an allowance, but he'd pay us in quarters, and then we'd all go play the slot machine. He'd always get us, he always came out ahead, I'll put it that way.
Howard was a good student with an active interest in philosophy and debate, in a family that promoted intellectual and constructive practices, business, finance, music, and the creative arts.
Your mom was a creative type. She had amazing talent as well.
There's a lot of musical talent in our family. I got 0. My brother's an amazing pianist and composer. My cousin was an amazing guitar player with the Jazz Crusaders. My mom was a great singer, but I got 0 talent. I tried my talent at drums because I figured beating on something was maybe would work, but I never quite got it right. So I have 0 musical talent.
You also experienced planting a little corn as a child.
Yeah, so we had, my mom would remember the name, but he was a Japanese guy who lived about 4 blocks away. And I remember him pretty well, I mean, for as young as I was. He was showing me how to plant corn, and we had this little patch of corn in our backyard. We had a pretty good sized backyard, so we had this little patch of corn. Actually, the photo has me with my first corn crop, which I can't tell you how many bushels per acre it was. And I'm wearing this police hat, and I'm with my corn crop. So if that isn't
prophetic.
A look into the future, I don't know what is.
Amazing.
Yeah.
He would go on to pursue a career in both farming and law enforcement, skills that eventually formed a framework for the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. But his curiosity for the world around him and the role his father played in it inspired a modest approach to life that his entire family still embraces today.
When was it that you started to be able to talk to your dad about some of the big business moves that he was making?
I used to listen to him a lot when I was growing up, and I remember when the Buffalo Evening News was going through a strike, and I don't remember the year. He was on the phone constantly, and I just sat there and listened to what was happening, and then he'd hang up and I'd ask him some questions about what was happening and what was going on. I found it pretty interesting. I had no concept of what really was happening. And I don't know what his wealth was when I was in junior high or high school, because it didn't change how we lived. And I think that would be one of the most key points is nothing ever changed in our life. I think people have this false impression that somehow we grew up in or this rich family or something. And the truth is, it didn't happen that way. We didn't feel any differently than anybody else growing up. And I would say that it wasn't until late in high school that there were some articles written about my dad that he was a guy earning a lot of money. My parents instilled the same values and principles and expectations in the 3 of us kids that somebody down the block did at 54th and Farnham Street. I mean, it's just, it just wasn't that different.
How did you get into agriculture?
I was always out in the dirt, and I was always playing with these big toy trucks and bulldozers. And when I got older, the thing I loved the most is running a bulldozer. If you can just put me somewhere and say, push that dirt, here's what we're trying to do. I just love running big equipment. When I was about 20 years old, I bought a cat loader, 955K, and I wanted to dig basements. And I decided I needed a trailer myself so I could haul my cat around and be a little more independent. I gave $4,500 to a guy, and it was my first business lesson because I gave him the whole $4,500 up front. It was right after I did that, and I thought, I really shouldn't have done that. I should have given him the first payment. He finally came back and said, well, I can't get the trailer built. I spent your money. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a 5-star Minneapolis Moline tractor. It's worth every bit of $4,500. I think it was worth maybe, $1,000. But it was the best I got. So I took it and I got on the tractor and said, I kind of like this better than running a bulldozer.
Did you know at that point, did you have any idea what you were going to do? Were you going to go to college? Did you have a career path?
I really was pretty set on going through law school, or I wanted to be a police officer. And I didn't do either. So, I did. I'm now a sworn deputy, but it took about 50 years. But I was really set on going to law school. But then I got sidetracked and bought a bulldozer and didn't make it to law school.
Like most young men in rural America, he began a career in manual labor with a growing interest in farm machinery, business, and agriculture. Along the way, he would dabble in politics, law, and other pursuits that led him to meet the love of his life and wife of almost 40 years, Devin Goss.
So you met your wife, Devin. She's 9 years your senior, and she had 4 kids at the time.
Well, the biggest problem is since she's 9 years older than I am, she thinks she's smarter than I am. So I have to live with that, but she probably is smarter than I am. But I guess when you fall in love, the kids aren't going to stop me. And I had a lot of fun with her kids. The big thing was I had to make this transition from playing around and having fun with the kids to being responsible and disciplining them. And that was a tough transition for everybody. I have to give a lot of credit to Devin. She never failed to back me up. She was very focused on just making everything work. They've all gone on and done, really great things in their life. So it's very rewarding to see them do that.
Now, with a family of his own and living back home in Nebraska, his passion for agriculture blossomed, and he was ready to start pursuing his career as a farmer.
Later, when I got married to Devin and came back, I saw that this farm is for rent, and I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea how to farm. I rented the farm, and then I kind of panicked, and I thought, God, how am I going to do this? Well, I knew this guy, Francis Kleinschmidt. Francis helped change my life because he came and helped me learn how to plant corn and how to harvest. And it was amazing the amount of time that he gave to me to learn how to do that. And I got by, and after a few years, I really started picking it up. When I decided I wanted to get into agriculture, I did not realize how difficult it was. And, I had no idea how you calculated populations for, planting corn or soybeans. So there's all these little things you have to learn. And it is a business. And I started figuring out really quickly, you can lose money farming fast if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. I was pretty fortunate that I didn't completely tank the first few years when I was trying to farm.
Your father knows a lot about risk, and your mom wants the best for you. What did they think about you going into this profession?
So my mom was very supportive, and my dad was just doing his own thing, and he's like, he just figured I was going to find something I like to do. And the greatest thing about the two of them was, you can be a teacher, you can be a janitor, you can be anything. I mean, I never thought I would be a farmer, but when we were growing up, and they would always tell all of us kids that you find something that you want to do and you find something you love doing and you'll do a great job.
That advice was certainly true, and Howard has spent a lifetime proving it. When we come back, we'll spend a day in the life of Howard G. Buffett, sworn deputy, Macon County Undersheriff, innovator, and philanthropist. Don't go anywhere. You're watching The Rural Americans. Howard Buffett finds inspiration everywhere he goes. As a born student of the human condition, his thirst for knowledge, love of travel, and natural talent for problem solving began to connect for him at a young age.
When I was 14 years old, we had a foreign exchange student, Vera Vatskova, who lived with us in Omaha. And in 1969, the Soviet Union took control of Czechoslovakia and occupied the country. And she went home and asked if any of us kids would want to come visit her. And I immediately said, I want to go. And my mom was, you can't go. It's a conflict area. It's dangerous. And she just kept pushing back. And so I kind of waited until the right moment, and my dad was sitting on the couch reading the newspaper. I still kind of remember it. And I said, Dad, don't you think it would be a really good experience for me to go to Czechoslovakia? And he puts the newspaper down. He says, yeah, Susanoo, he should go. And I thought, yes. So I'm still surprised she let me go.
The trip was an eye-opener and life-changing for an impressionable young man from the United States.
At the time, they were really limiting traffic and visitation in and out of Czechoslovakia because of the circumstances. I get on this plane and I'm going to fly over to Czechoslovakia, by myself. And what I remember is flying in and landing in Prague and seeing all these tanks on the airstrip. And there's some pretty mean, big-looking soldiers with machine guns to get through immigration. And now all of a sudden my stomach is like, I'm pretty nervous because I think, what if Vera is in here to pick me up? What happens if something goes wrong? Now the reality is really sinking in. But she was there and I got through immigration, and I think it changed the trajectory of my life. I saw conflict in a way that was very oppressive and very difficult for people to deal with in the country. And the Soviet Union, the soldiers, they would take all the meat and they would take all the vegetables and they would take everything that they wanted for their military. And so it was slim pickings. I was only there about 3 weeks, but we were put on a very strict diet in terms of just, how much we could eat, because it was only how much they could buy and how much they could get. So it was an incredible experience, and I think it really had a huge impact on what I did with my future.
This exposure to the harsh realities of life outside the U.S. was something he would never forget. The growing problem of global food insecurity could not be ignored, and inspired his passion to grow food and feed hungry people around the world.
You know what is unusual is the chance that you've had to go around the world and you've seen people from how many countries have you traveled to?
153.
153 different countries.
Yeah.
Seeing people from all walks of life. What have you learned about the human condition? What has that travel and then coming back?
It's tough.
Yeah.
Most people live in situations with some kind of a challenge, and the challenge can be, if my daughter goes to school, there's a 50% chance she gets raped. It can be moms who have had to make choices of which child to essentially invest the resources that they have, which are very minimal, because they know somebody's going to die. I had a woman in Angola walk up to me, young kids dying of malnutrition at record levels at the time. She kept pushing her child, this little baby, into my chest and trying to get me to take the child. She basically was saying, take my child, because if my child stays here, it cannot live. And I had to explain to that mother, I can't take your child. And when you see that happening, it's a pretty humbling experience, because you're basically telling somebody you can't help them. And all the money in the world couldn't have changed it. And this is something that most, even farmers, wouldn't understand, how complicated it is to get food to places like this.
He soon realized the problem was about more than just supplying food to starving countries and would require more complex solutions. Meanwhile, his father's financial investments were paying off, and he established a small endowment that his children could donate to a charitable cause. This was a valuable lesson in the challenges of giving money away to maximize the impact and long-term benefits of financial contribution. This would mean understanding the problem before trying to solve it.
You served on the board of some major ag companies. How did that lend to your efforts to try to help teach people how to farm overseas?
I traveled a lot for ConAgra when I was on their board, a lot to India, to Africa when I was for the Lindsay board. ADM was phenomenal for my relationship building and learning for Mexico. And you learn by showing up and listening to the people who are experiencing the problem. Being on that board gave me more exposure to different circumstances that revolved or were related to agriculture.
As his knowledge of farming and food disparity in other countries grew, so did his resources. Soon, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation was granted $35 million to be used for charitable causes, and he did not take the responsibility lightly.
It was a real lesson for me to learn the pieces that were involved, and there's a lot more pieces, but I mean, what is actually involved. I learned a great lesson on that trip. Sierra Leone and Zambia, there were a number of villages. This was one of a dozen. They had had 2 or 3 years of drought. I said, well, let's get them some more seeds to plant. They said, well, we can't give them seeds because they'll eat the seeds. They'll cook the seeds and eat the seeds. And then I said, well, what about the kids? And they said, no, to be able to do anything with the kids, you have to come in and you actually have to have a medical assessment done of the village, of each village, to determine which kids have to be on therapeutic feeding and which kids can take regular food. Then I called the guy who ran the World Food Program, because I knew him, he's a great guy. And I just said, how do we get food over here? He calls me back a few days later and he says, well, we don't have any food in the 3 warehouses we checked. If we put it on a ship, it's going to be 10 weeks by the time the ship gets there. And I said, well, 10 weeks is like forever. And he said, well, that's even if we can do it. He says, I can't even tell you we can do it. And it was a time where I realized that you can't come in with this Western thinking and say, well, I'm going to take this village and I'm going to give them the best doctors and the best healthcare and the best agriculture. I'm going to give them the hybrid seeds and the fertilizer, and I'm just going to pour all this into this village and it's going to work. What it does, it creates a lot of conflict, because all the people around you, all the people around that village, they don't have that. There's millions of these little villages, and you couldn't possibly get to all those villages and develop all that. I mean, it's trillions of dollars. You know, your investment needs to be an investment. It needs to invest in the people that can learn how to sustain their own practices, because you cannot ever continue to pour money into these villages for years and years and years.
Determined to be as informed and prepared as possible, he began to seek out new avenues for learning, teaching, and addressing our problems at home.
In 1987, I ran for the Douglas County Board in Omaha, and I got elected. So I started that term in '88, and I didn't want to stay in politics. And so I decided to move to Decatur, and then we've been here ever since.
Today, we're riding along with Howard Buffett, former sheriff of Macon County in Decatur, Illinois. This evening, he's working a shift as sworn deputy of nearby Christian County, another career born in an ongoing pursuit of knowledge.
In early 2012, I was stopped in Arizona by a deputy. And I know I haven't broken any laws, so I know that it's not a correct stop. But I've never had the opportunity to be involved in law enforcement in this country, but I've certainly seen other countries how they're affected by a lack of rule of law or poor law enforcement or dishonest law enforcement, all those things. So I came back after that trip and I said to the sheriff here, Tom Schneider, I would really like to understand our system better, and is there any way to do that? And he says, yes, you can become an auxiliary deputy. You have to qualify, you have to take written tests, you have to go through a certain amount of verbal instruction, and then you have to spend 40 hours on the range. Also pass your range test, your shooting test. That's when I started as an auxiliary.
Howard wanted to use his experience abroad to inform the decisions he was making at home. The education he was getting overseas was invaluable to bring his work to the streets of rural America.
Like, for instance, in El Salvador, we're working with the Attorney General, the National Police. When I'm involved with those kinds of activities, I have a much better understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, what their goals are, and sometimes even be able, to make some suggestions on things.
As a law enforcement officer, he spent time doing what he does best, meeting people, facing their problems head on, connecting the dots, and learning what makes us tick.
So I've gone over to Scotland twice to look at and understand and learn from how they do things. And it's an interesting balance because they have much more of a priority on sanctity of life than we do in this country. They also can afford to police differently because there's so few guns that are used. So when they think, oh, that guy might pull a knife, we're thinking that guy might pull a gun. So mentally, you're thinking differently, and you have to.
Armed with a caring heart and extensive knowledge of human behavior, he applies the practical insight and kindness he learned from his mom and dad, even in the face of danger.
My goal always is to try to keep the situation as calm as possible. This job inherently has risk with it. I know that when I get in this vehicle and go out tonight, I know there's a certain amount of risk and something can happen to me. That doesn't give me the right to assume that I can do anything I need to do at any time. I always have to take into consideration what the options are, what I could do to alleviate a potentially lethal situation. I kind of go with it. It's like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But there are a lot of things you can do to de-escalate situations, and you have to always consider those options. Doesn't mean you'll be able to implement those options, but you always have to be thinking that way. And I think cops are going to start looking at it more like that because they're going to realize that it's not a given that I can do whatever I want to do and not pay some kind of consequences for it.
When we come back, we'll visit the Macon County Law Enforcement Training Center for a first-hand look at what it takes to become a police officer. You're watching The Rural Americans.
More than happy to point out.
Howard Buffett, former sheriff of Macon County and sworn deputy of neighboring Christian County, is clocking in for work, and it's going to be a long night.
We're getting prepared to go into service in Christian County. It's going to take us about 10 minutes to get to the county line. We'll call in when we get to the county line. We'll be looking for about this time at night, usually plenty of people speeding on 51, so we might make a couple traffic stops. And then we'll be available for service calls from dispatch. So I'd like to stay out till at least 11, but I don't know if that's past your bedtime, so we'll see. Yeah, so we'll see what's going on. That's it.
You really stay out till 11?
Oh, it's usually much later than that. Lots. Christian, 1153.
1153, go ahead for Christian.
I'll be 1041, and I have a passenger riding with me this evening. Get ready, here we come.
As a deputy, he spends a lot of time driving the beat, working to keep the streets safe. Most of the time, it's relatively uneventful.
That's a nice truck.
Typical action in small rural areas include broken taillights, rowdy
Christian,
youngsters,
Olympics,
and the
traffic
occasional
stop.
speeding ticket.
Ma'am, how are you doing tonight?
I think bad.
What's that?
I don't know. I'm like, what's happening?
I'm stopping you because I got you going 74 and it's 55-mile-an-hour zone. Did you know you were going a little fast or not? No?
I just
Okay.
got off for work and we've just been having a long day, so I was just like ready to go home.
Well, I don't blame you. We all feel that way sometimes. So I got to put it on a written warning, and that doesn't mean anything. You can take it home and throw it in the fireplace, okay? And I put 68 instead of 74, so it don't look so bad. You're free to go, and if you just let us pull out. Thank you.
This stop was pretty average, but public perception of the police is rapidly changing, and not for the better.
There's so many good police officers out there who I feel like might be getting a bad rap right now.
Well, we're all getting a bad rap.
Yeah.
You can expect when you make a traffic stop, it's a little bit different in an urban area than a rural area because we do both, and so we have that experience. 50% of the time when you make a traffic stop, maybe even more than that now, people are going to be very rude. They're going to be disrespectful. They won't cooperate. I mean, it's changed so much.
Go ahead.
Christian County Cars, we've got a Esperant, wanted fleeing and eluding theft from UJ's gas station in Oklahoma. Last seen observed East 20th Road, northbound, possibly en route to Christian County.
We want to find that guy.
Every call, even simple theft, could be potentially dangerous. A stress that Howard handles with good humor and a calm demeanor.
Look at all these people pulled over. That's unusual.
I'm sorry, but I really am thrilled by this.
You what?
I'm thrilled.
Oh,
This
well.
is exciting.
It'll be more exciting if we find this truck. We'll get some action then.
You'll get him.
All right, thanks. Oh, yeah.
It's pretty exhilarating at times. You gotta like that, at least at some level.
Yeah, well, it gets your adrenaline going. I mean, I've been hit by a PKM round in a helicopter in Congo, and I've had Uzis put in my chest in Central African Republic. I mean, I've had plenty of experiences that get your adrenaline going. So I am an adrenaline junkie. I mean, there's no question about that.
As a cop, nothing can be taken lightly. But even in serious situations, Howard applies the skills of compassion and communication to help influence change for the better.
You need sugar. My dog ate my candy bar. It's like the dog ate the homework, right?
Right.
But you haven't been
What's
down
in the
for 7
sock?
years.
Expired.
Oh, that's money.
So they just basically put them on hold. I can't renew them until.
Okay. All
That's
right.
a lot of money.
Okay, that's fine.
$5,000 in cash and a little bit of weed, but they just came from a dope house, which means we got the wrong end of it because we can't prove the money's. I mean, there are some guys that would seize that money, but they're not going to do it. They're probably right not to do it. Vait, quiet.
As first responders, police are often confronted with situations of mental health, a standard he felt was lacking in standard police training.
We had a 13-year-old girl moved here 2 weeks ago from Phoenix. Primary diagnosis is bipolar, possible other underlying symptoms. She's been hospitalized for 2 weeks in Phoenix, and that's where they've lived. They just moved back here. Cody stepped in and he's talking to her now, so I can't talk to her. Better letting him try to talk to her because she's just, the more of us standing there, the more she'll run away again, probably by the sounds of it. Was she sitting back up here then?
Sent.
Huh?
What do you mean sent?
Well,
They moved
she was down
in
there.
Arizona, yes, from birth till
How'd she
now.
end up back here?
Mom and them moved here to get away from. She's with the cops all the time down there.
Oh.
And it's not Taylorville, it's Arizona.
Yeah,
So
I know the guys. I know a few guys in Phoenix.
Though mental health situations can usually be resolved peacefully, there are certainly times when the use of force is unavoidable.
My job is to protect everybody. So if at that particular time I can try to protect someone who wants to hurt themselves, then they're just as important to me as anybody else. I'm not going to go home at night and not feel like I didn't try hard enough to end a situation where the use of force could have been less or maybe didn't have to happen. That does not mean I'm going to let my guard down or put myself in a vulnerable position. A kid who walks in and decides he's going to shoot and kill as many people in a school as he can, that's not just mental illness. Something got him to that point,
Right,
to make that decision.
combined.
I think it's ideology, it's hate, it's fear, it's a combination of those things, and something drives that kid or whoever it is. It's like,
Exactly.
what in the world was that guy thinking? Why did he do that? And nobody will ever know the answer to that. You can just easily say, oh, well, he was mentally ill, and it's like, but you don't really know what he was doing. You don't know what his motivation was or what was driving him. So it's not always that simple.
It's for these very situations that thorough and diverse levels of training become imperative. And Howard soon recognized how the foundation could have the greatest impact on his rural community, the people, and the state of Illinois. Welcome to the state-of-the-art Macon County Law Enforcement Training Center, a $15 million complex for training professionals through education and practical application.
This can be used for every kind of training you can imagine. They really use this for more than they probably did in the past is de-escalation. They want you to learn how to talk the guy down, or don't draw your weapon too fast, use your taser instead of a gun. Just like different scenarios that make you think through, what are my options?
Role play is a valuable tool in training for dangerous situations, and digital simulators instantly put cadets in a variety of conditions, some with potentially deadly outcomes. And believe me, it gets very intense.
This is an active shooter. I'm gonna tell you what you're going into here, and then let me tell you a little bit about the active shooter. Years ago, you know how law enforcement would show up, wait for backup to go into an active shooter situation. We haven't done that for years. Now it's when there is an active shooter in a business, in a school particularly, we go. So the first officer in the scene goes. Now we teach active shooter here, and we teach different formations and stuff if you have multiple officers, but if you have one officer, that officer goes and stops the threat. So that's what you are. It's a shots fired call at a high school campus. And always remember that if you do engage a threat, there could always be another threat.
All units, we have shots fired. Central High School, 3527 East Main. We got shots fired. Let's move. Where they go? Where are they? How many of them are there?
How many shooters are there? Did you happen to see how many shooters? One or two?
Where did they go? Where are they? Where did they go?
Who? Go into the library. Stay where you are. Stay where you are.
Watch how they're backing up.
Hey! You get some good acting
Take
in
your
this.
finger off the trigger, put 2 hands on the gun. Use 2 hands on your gun. Pay attention, you're not done.
Put the gun down.
Put both hands on your gun and get ready to aim.
Put the gun down. This doesn't have to end like this. It doesn't have to be like this. You can still have a good life ahead of you, and so can she. No, you don't want to watch her die. Put the gun. Oh. Intense.
How many shots do you think you fired?
Total?
Total.
20?
48. Give you an idea.
Once you've drawn a gun, you don't have too far to go backwards. And the school shooting, you're trying to protect students. So it's a good one to train on, because if it happens, you need to be prepared for it.
Not everyone is cut out to be a first responder, and training doesn't just prepare good candidates, it helps to root out potentially bad ones.
I think one of the things that you've seen come out publicly that I believe it is an issue, if you have a problem officer that you know is somebody who you don't want as a police officer, you should be able to do something about that. And it's in some places it's very difficult to do that, to have the people working for you that you think are the best people, the most committed people, the people that are going to bring integrity to your office and treat citizens right. And when you see somebody not doing that, you need to be able to no longer have that person in your employment. It's just that there's no other way to say it, You have to also realize that officers put in very difficult and also a multitude of different experiences. You have to allow them to make mistakes. I mean, they are going to make mistakes, but you have to make sure that officer learns from it and he's willing to learn from it. And the next time he faces those same circumstances, that he has an idea in his head what he should have done different, what he could do different, and what he plans on doing different.
When we come back, we get an inside look at the full scope of the Foundation's plan for the future and how the Howard G. Buffett strategy takes training, education, and the global humanitarian cause to a whole new level. This is The Rural Americans. Today, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation has helped to design, build, and implement the most advanced law enforcement training facility in Illinois, equipped with state-of-the-art training tools. Paired with the lessons Howard has learned through his life, the Foundation provides a perfect combination of resource, experience, respect, integrity, discipline, and excellence.
This is our indoor obstacle course.
Did you go through a rigorous training?
Oh my God,
like
I would
this?
never get through it. Come here. Hey, let's go up, let's go up. Come on, let's go up, let's go up. Come on, up. This is the mat room. These guys are learning how to take somebody down, how to cuff them, how to do it properly, and do it also with the least amount of impact. We have a lot of tools like this. We have what they call blue guns, which are for training, so they're hard rubber. We'll have knives. You know that's a training item. Now these can still hurt a little bit. They're blunt, but you know, you can get into an altercation with someone and then you can run in here or chase them in here. Not in every instance, but in certain instances. You can chase them in here and they would be able to come in the mat room and then have a little fight. So this gives them a chance to do scenario training in here, which includes, like I said, having the 2 stories. So if they have a fight or somebody's gonna jump off or push somebody off or whatever. We have the regular doors, so you come in, you close the doors in the proper order, you do the booking. If you have a DUI suspect, there's a room there where you interrogate the suspect.
Police, firemen, first responders, even rescue divers have specially designed facilities on campus.
The divers can come in and sit down here, and then what we do is we can open this up, and it allows them to mark on here what training exercise they want to do. Shows where the Suburban, the vehicle, the bus, they need to try to break the windows out, they can do it. I mean, you know, it's pretty hard to do underwater, but yeah, if they need to practice, they can. So Cody and I have both rappelled off this tower a few times. So this will be a good facility for rural fire departments, so they can come up here and they can train on the tower. This tower has 3 1,200 degree rooms and maybe one 1,700 degree. I was in one of them to put a fire out.
Wow.
It's hot. And I realized with the helmet and your oxygen mask and all this gear on, and you go in and it's pitch dark, and all you got is flames. I just realized how easy it could be to get disoriented and not know which way is up or down or how you get out of a room. It gave me a whole new level of respect for firefighters. The cops are always making fun of the firefighters. I don't make as much fun of them anymore.
Farmers will benefit from these resources as well, with grain bin safety and rescue training, a serious issue that impacts ag families across the country every year.
It's so heartbreaking when you hear the stories, especially of children, you know, sneaking in, playing hide and seek in the grain bin.
Every year, there's a couple guys that will die from suffocating in a bin, and you don't think it's going to happen to you. That's always one of the problems. So we're going to put one grain bin in there so that you can actually practice harnessing and dropping into the grain bin. Then we have a BFT that's only going to be about this high, and we'll have that so that you can drop the grain from the BFT into another BFT below it. And then you can watch the guy, he'll be harnessed. You can watch how that corn pulls you in and why you can't struggle to get out. So it'll be a good demonstration for farmers who want to actually see how it happens. And then it's set up so we can just instantly drain the grain if something would happen to the guy that's in it or whatever. I mean, you know, so whoever needs to train on the safety rescue part of the grain bins, they'll be able to come here and do that.
A new $5 million dispatch facility is up and running, and soon neighboring counties will benefit from the upgrade as well, a blessing that is not lost on the men and women of the community.
When you travel outside of this campus and you talk to people on the streets about Howard Buffett, what's the general feel for Howard amongst the community?
I think there's a great deal of appreciation for everything Howard's done. I have a great appreciation for what he did here for the dispatchers. I don't want to say dispatchers are neglected, but a lot of times people don't think about it. They think about police and about fire, not so much about dispatchers. But even outside in the community, you see all of the many things he's done. It's not just law enforcement, or fire or first responder related things. It's things he's done for the Drug Rehabilitation Center, the school district, working with them, working in the neighborhoods to rehab the neighborhoods in the city. He's done a lot for this community, and I think everyone's appreciative.
Howard's passion to help save lives extends even further into medical care, substance abuse treatment, and drug rehabilitation centers. The Crossing Clinic is a federally qualified health center for underserved communities and a vital part of the Foundation's strategy to improve the lives and conditions for men and women suffering from addiction across Illinois. Tanya Andrick, CEO, knows the substance abuse problems facing rural Americans need compassion and personal attention, qualities she sees in Howard, and in the ways that he embraces human solutions to treat human needs.
The one thing that I've learned the most from getting the opportunity to work with Sheriff Buffett is his style for solving problems is he goes to the source, he goes to the people with the problem. He goes directly to the problem. He doesn't read about it in an article and talk to a couple experts and then think that he knows. He goes and finds out for himself. And so the way that you find out is you talk to the people with the problem. And I've learned that from watching him. When you have a conversation with him, you understand that he genuinely cares. He's constantly trying to understand and know more. He has resources that he's tasked with using to better our world, and he's trying to figure out how to do that, whether it's in Congo or whether it's here, and if it's food insecurity or if it's substance use, the way you understand it is you talk to the people with the problem. And so it is why he's effective at what he does, and it is actually one of the things that I've learned from him.
Anything can happen to you at any time. It hits everywhere. No one's immune. You're one step from being homeless. You're one step from being having a drug addiction. You don't know what's going to happen in your life, and no one's above that, and no one's better than that. And no one can say, I'm going to never have it happen to me. So I think you have to treat everybody like a human being. So you want to provide as much opportunity for as many people to latch onto something they feel good about and help them through that recovery. So it could be somebody who played the guitar or the drums. It could be somebody who wanted to be in theater or used to be in drama and said, hey man, I'm going to get back into this. They find 2 or 3 other people and they do it together. Could be somebody who used to love to play basketball. Having the opportunity to engage in an activity that you love and that's important to you and maybe you do with others is absolutely going to help you work through your issues. You can recover from substance abuse, but if you don't have the self-esteem, the confidence, and then eventually the economic independence, a job, you're not going to be successful. They have to feel good about themselves. They're not, and they can't really do it without help.
The center offers job opportunities to men and women in the program who take pride in changing their life for the better and helping others do the same. Their unique life struggles even offer valuable insight to the methods and practices of the program itself.
I've never heard of anybody tailoring workouts to overcome addiction.
I did my own research and found out what was going on with different drugs and how they affected the mental aspect of the brain. The dopamine, the oxycontin, the serotonin, endorphin levels. It makes a workout tailored to that sort of drug.
This is the greatest thing that could ever happen to this town. That's how I feel about it. You know what I'm saying? I thank God for Mr. Buffett. And today being clean is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I mean, the things that I learned, I use every day. Everything that I did over there, I do to this day. I have an accountability partner, and I do what they tell me to do, and it keeps me clean. You know, one thing I understand and I learned in this program, I can only save myself. I can give away what I've learned, but I can only save myself. This is a great program that's here for people that want help, but that's just the thing, you have to want it. The doors are there and it's open, but you got to walk through it.
Why do you care so much about this particular rural community, Decatur, Illinois? What is this community?
Well, that's where we live. It's I think you always do as much as you can, where you live. Rural America is one place where your neighbor still helps you. They don't ask questions. They don't expect anything in return. They don't even maybe know you. You have so many people ready to pick corn or cut soybeans that it's almost like you got to get some of them out of the way. There's an attitude in rural America, especially amongst farmers, and they're going to help no matter what it takes, and even if they have to sacrifice something for themselves.
The Foundation's current project is the Baby Talk School, designed to impact child development and nurture healthy parent-child relationships during the critical early years. And of course, Howard's first love, farming, will always stay near and dear to his heart. It even inspired the title and the spirit of his book, 40 Chances.
Sloan Implement had a planter school. I thought, well, I'll go. I mean, I can always learn something. Probably 50 farmers there, and there's a guy there. He said, by the time your dad climbs off the tractor and turn it over to your kids, you'll probably be on that tractor about 40 times to plant about 40 crops, 40 seasons. It really stuck with me because if I'm only going to plant 40 crops in my lifetime, every year I have to get it better because I have this very finite, limited amount of time. And I really had not thought about it that way. And my dad used to kid me because he says, well, I think maybe I have 50 chances. But the 40 chances came from 40 crop seasons. There's a lot of truth to that.
At the end of the day, after all is said and done, Howard Buffett is a farmer through and through, and he wouldn't have it any other way.
Farming will be my last profession because it'll be, when I can't really do much else, I will find a way to at least be involved with farming. Okay, this is all our farm ground on the left. We got farm ground on the right. We got about 1,200 acres right in here. So I have 1,600 acres here that's my own, that's down south where we're going.
I'm seeing a lot of green on your farm here.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for John Deere tractors?
Well, cut me and I'll bleed green. Yeah, I'm a pretty fanatical John Deere guy. So I think this is the world's largest roller crimper. It's 60 feet wide. It's built on a 24-row toolbar, so it saves a lot of money, but it's not as easy as it looks. We continue to work on all of this and get better at it, smarter at it. It's a machine that I hope eventually will become an opportunity for farmers to use. It's just not a big market right now.
What do you say to the farmers of America?
Oh, I think they're the heart and soul of this country. You can get into the small farmer versus the big farmer, the commercial versus the whatever, but there's nobody that works harder, that's more committed to making sure that this country is well fed and well taken care of. And so I think that they deserve all the credit that they get. We are living in a country much greater than most other countries in the world. I think everybody should see life outside of the United States. And I'm not talking about Paris, France. I mean, going to the Eiffel Tower, I'm talking about going to Ghana or Congo or El Salvador or, places where people just live completely different than we live. And there's reasons they live differently. It's a lack of resources. It's a lack of rule of law, corruption. It's things that make people poor and keep people poor. There's all this turmoil in the United States today. Yeah, we have a lot of issues and we have a lot of inequities. We have a lot of problems we need to address. And if you haven't been able to compare what you have to somebody, you really don't know what you have. It's just what my mom and dad expected of us, and it's how they lived. I mean, we're living like what we saw, and my brother and sister are the same way. I mean, really all three of us kids got that because we had that combination growing up. So, we watched both our parents do things in a way that kind of taught us that. Characteristics of both my mom and dad that helped us develop the way that we are today.
I actually read a quote from your father that says in jest that you got his head, but your mom's heart. Do you think that's accurate?
I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah, it's a good quote. I won't argue with it.
Yeah.